The letter was addressed to a boy whose own father said he was not worth supporting. The black limousine appeared just after 3 o'clock in the afternoon, gliding slowly down a quiet street lined with aging rental homes on the west side of Columbus, Ohio. Neighbors noticed immediately. Cars like that did not belong in this part of town. Children stopped riding their bicycles. Curtains shifted behind windows. A few people stepped onto porches pretending not to stare. The limousine rolled to a stop directly in front of a small white house with peeling paint and a narrow front yard that had seen better days. Inside the house, Emily Carter stood at the kitchen counter sorting through bills. The late autumn sunlight filtered through faded curtains, painting long shadows across the room. An overdue electric bill rested beside a grocery receipt and a school fundraiser flyer. Emily folded the papers carefully and slipped them into a drawer before her 12-year-old son could see them. Ethan was sitting at the small kitchen table, finishing his homework. His sneakers were worn at the edges. The backpack leaning against his chair had been repaired twice with careful stitching. Yet he worked quietly, focused on a science project that had excited him for weeks. Emily glanced toward him and smiled. Somehow he always found reasons to be hopeful. Her phone buzzed on the counter. The caller ID displayed a familiar name. Ryan Carter, Ethan's father. Emily stared at the screen for a moment before answering. Hello. Ryan did not waste time with greetings. I got another notice from the court. Emily closed her eyes briefly. She already knew where the conversation was heading. Ryan, it is about Ethan. I know what it is about. His voice carried irritation rather than concern. And I already told them I cannot keep paying money every time they send paperwork. Emily looked toward her son, lowering her voice. You have not paid anything in almost 2 years. Silence filled the line for a second. That is not my problem. The words landed harder than Emily expected, even after all these years. Across the table, Ethan remained focused on his notebook, unaware of the conversation. He is your son, Emily said quietly. Ryan sighed. I have my own life now. Emily felt something cold settle inside her chest. Not anger, not surprise, just disappointment that never seemed to end. Fine, she replied. I will figure it out. Ryan ended the call without another word. The silence afterward felt heavier than the conversation itself. Emily placed the phone face down on the counter. Outside, a car door closed. Then another. Ethan looked up from his homework. Mom, what is it? There is a fancy car outside. Emily walked toward the front window and froze. The limousine sat at the curb like something from another world. 2 professionally dressed men stepped onto the sidewalk. One carried a leather briefcase. The other held a long envelope sealed with dark red wax. Emily immediately assumed there had been a mistake. Nobody looking for her arrived in a limousine. Nobody carrying expensive briefcases ever came to this neighborhood. The doorbell rang. Ethan stood and moved toward the entryway, but Emily gently stopped him. Let me answer. She opened the door cautiously. The older of the 2 men offered a polite smile. Good afternoon. Are you Emily Carter? Yes. And does Ethan Carter live here? Emily nodded slowly. He does. The man opened his briefcase and removed several documents. Excellent. We have been trying to locate him. Emily frowned. My son. Yes, ma'am. The younger man stepped forward and presented the envelope. The red wax seal shimmered in the afternoon light. This is for Ethan Carter. Emily looked down at the envelope. Her son's name appeared in elegant black lettering across the front. Ethan Carter. Nothing else. No return address. No explanation. Just her son's name. Ethan appeared behind her. Mom, what is it? Emily stared at the envelope, confused. I do not know. The older man adjusted his glasses. We have been instructed to personally deliver this notice and confirm receipt. Emily accepted the envelope carefully. The paper felt unusually heavy. Expensive. Important. Who sent this? She asked. The 2 men exchanged a brief glance. That information is contained inside. Emily's heart began beating. Faster. Is this some kind of mistake? No, ma'am. The older man smiled gently. There is no mistake. Ethan looked from the envelope to the limousine and back again. Mom, why would somebody send me something like that? Emily wished she had an answer, but she did not. The men thanked her and returned to the limousine. Moments later, the vehicle disappeared down the street, leaving behind only confused neighbors and an envelope that suddenly felt far heavier than paper should. Inside the house, the afternoon seemed strangely quiet. Emily and Ethan sat at the kitchen table, staring at the sealed envelope between them. Outside, autumn leaves drifted across the yard beneath a gray sky. Neither of them knew that somewhere hundreds of miles away, a billionaire's final decision had already set their future into motion. And neither of them could imagine that the little boy whose father refused to support him was about to become the center of a story that would change everything. The envelope remained untouched for nearly 5 minutes. It sat in the center of the kitchen table like an object that did not belong there, surrounded by pencil marks, homework papers, and a half-finished glass of milk. Outside, the afternoon slowly faded toward evening. Inside, Emily Carter could hear the old refrigerator humming in the corner, while Ethan stared at the red wax seal as though it might suddenly explain itself. "Are you going to open it?" he finally asked. Emily looked down at the envelope again. "I think we should." Her fingers carefully broke the seal. The paper unfolded with a crisp sound that seemed unusually loud in the quiet kitchen. Several documents slid onto the table. At the top was a formal letter printed on expensive stationery. Emily began reading silently. Within seconds, her expression changed. "Mom," Ethan asked, "what does it say?" Emily read the first paragraph again to make sure she had not misunderstood. The words remained exactly the same. "This letter is from Harrington, Cole, and Barnes," she said quietly. "A law firm." Ethan leaned forward. "Why would lawyers send me something?" Emily continued reading. Her heart began beating faster with every line. The letter stated that William Harrington had passed away 6 weeks earlier. The name meant nothing to her. She had never met anyone named William Harrington. Yet according to the document, Ethan was required to attend a private legal proceeding in New York City regarding the execution of the deceased man's final will and testament. Ethan blinked. "Who is William Harrington?" "I do not know." Emily turned to the second page. A photograph paper-clipped to the documents slipped loose. She picked it up. The image showed an elderly man standing beside a large estate. His silver hair was neatly combed. His expression carried the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to being listened to. Ethan studied the photograph. "That is him." Emily nodded. Something about the face felt strangely familiar, though she could not explain why. She turned the photograph over. On the back, a name was written in elegant handwriting. "William Edward Harrington." Ethan watched her carefully. "Do you know him?" "No." Yet even as she answered, uncertainty crept into her voice. Somewhere in her memory, the name tugged at something old and forgotten. A memory from childhood, perhaps. A conversation overheard long ago. Before she could think further, her phone rang again. This time the caller ID displayed an unfamiliar New York number. Emily hesitated before answering. "Hello, Mrs. Carter?" The voice belonged to the older man who had delivered the envelope. "Yes. I wanted to confirm that you received the documents." "We did." "Excellent." He paused. "I understand this may feel unexpected." Emily glanced at the photograph. Unexpected is one word for it. The man chuckled politely. "I imagined so. Can you tell me why my son is involved?" Silence followed for a moment. "I am afraid that information must remain confidential until the formal reading." Emily felt frustration rising. "You expect me to take my son across the country without any explanation?" "I understand your concern, Mrs. Carter. However, I can assure you that your presence is extremely important." "Important how?" Again the pause. "Because Mr. Harrington specifically requested it." The answer only created more questions. After the call ended, Emily sat quietly while evening shadows stretched across the kitchen floor. Ethan looked at the documents. "Do you think it is real?" "I do not know." "Could it be a scam?" Emily considered the possibility. Yet everything about the situation felt too elaborate. The law firm existed. The documents looked authentic. The men who delivered them had appeared professional in every way. "I do not think so," she admitted. Ethan stared at the photograph again. Why would a rich guy want me at his will reading? Emily wished she knew. Later that evening, after Ethan went upstairs to finish homework, Emily opened an old storage box hidden in the back of her bedroom closet. Inside were photographs, birthday cards, and family keepsakes she had not touched in years. She searched carefully through the contents until she found a faded picture of her mother taken nearly 20 years earlier. Her breath caught slightly. Standing beside her mother at what appeared to be a charity event was the same man from the photograph. Older now, but unmistakably the same person. William Harrington. Emily sat down slowly on the edge of the bed. Memories returned in fragments. Her mother occasionally mentioning a wealthy family she once worked for. Mysterious holiday cards arriving every December. Conversations that always seemed to stop when Emily entered the room. Suddenly, the unfamiliar name no longer felt unfamiliar at all. Downstairs, Ethan called from the kitchen asking what they should have for dinner. Emily remained seated for another moment, staring at the old photograph. Somewhere between her mother's past and her son's future, a secret had been waiting for years. And for the first time, Emily began to suspect that the letter was not arriving at the beginning of a story. It was arriving at the end of one that had started long before Ethan was ever born. 3 weeks later, Emily Carter and her son stepped out of a taxi onto a quiet Manhattan street lined with historic buildings and polished black town cars. Ethan pressed his face against the window before they exited. Everything felt different from Ohio. Taller buildings, faster crowds, endless movement. The city seemed larger than anything he had ever imagined. Emily adjusted the strap of her handbag and looked up at the address printed on the invitation. The law offices occupied the upper floors of an elegant stone building overlooking Central Park. Uniformed attendants stood near the entrance. Men and women in tailored suits moved through revolving glass doors. Ethan looked down at his sneakers and then back at the building. "Mom, are we supposed to be here?" Emily wished she felt more confident about the answer. According to the letter, yes. They entered together. Inside, marble floors reflected soft golden lighting. Paintings decorated the walls. The atmosphere felt more like a museum than a law office. A receptionist greeted them immediately. "Mrs. Carter?" Emily nodded. "We have been expecting you." Those words somehow made the situation feel even stranger. An assistant escorted them upstairs to a private conference room. Along the way, Ethan noticed framed newspaper articles covering decades of business history. One name appeared repeatedly: William Harrington. The deeper they moved into the building, the more obvious his importance became. By the time they reached the conference room, Ethan understood that this was not merely a wealthy man. This was someone whose influence stretched across entire industries. The assistant opened the door. Conversation inside stopped instantly. Nearly 20 people sat around a massive polished table. Business executives, attorneys, older family members, financial advisors. Several individuals glanced toward Emily and Ethan with open curiosity. Others appeared confused. A few seemed irritated. Emily immediately felt out of place. She wore her nicest department store dress. Most people in the room looked as though they had stepped out of magazine advertisements. The older attorney who delivered the envelope approached with a warm smile. "Mrs. Carter." "Ethan, thank you for coming." Ethan nodded politely. "You are welcome." The attorney laughed softly. "You remind me of someone." Before Ethan could ask who, another door opened. The room gradually fell silent. A senior attorney entered carrying a thick leather folder. Everyone took their seats. Emily felt her pulse quicken. Across the room, she noticed several people studying Ethan. One older woman whispered something to the man beside her. The man frowned. Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Mom," he whispered, "why are they looking at me?" Emily squeezed his hand gently. "I do not know." The attorney cleared his throat. "Thank you all for attending the reading of the final will and testament of William Edward Harrington." The room became completely still. For the next 30 minutes, various assets were discussed. Charitable foundations, corporate holdings, real estate investments, art collections, family trusts. Names were called. Allocations were announced. Several people appeared satisfied. Others appeared disappointed. Yet throughout the entire process, Emily noticed one detail. Nobody had explained why she and Ethan were present. Finally, after most of the document had been reviewed, the attorney turned to a separate section. The atmosphere changed immediately. Several attorneys exchanged looks. Family members sat straighter in their chairs. The room suddenly felt tense. "There remains one final provision," the attorney said. Every eye focused on him. A personal instruction left directly by Mr. Harrington. The attorney opened another document. "In accordance with his wishes, this statement is to be read without interruption." Silence settled over the room. "To those gathered here today," the attorney began, "you know me as a businessman, investor, and philanthropist. However, there is one part of my life known only to a very small number of people." Emily felt her stomach tighten. Many years ago, circumstances led me to lose contact with individuals who mattered greatly to me. The attorney continued reading. For decades, I monitored their lives from a distance. I respected their privacy. I honored promises that prevented direct involvement. But I never forgot them. Several family members exchanged confused looks. Ethan sat motionless. The attorney turned the page. My greatest regret was allowing time to pass, while believing there would always be more of it. Emily suddenly remembered her mother's old holiday cards. The mysterious gifts that occasionally arrived without explanation. The conversations that ended whenever questions were asked. A terrible possibility began forming in her mind. Then the attorney spoke the next sentence. Emily Carter, please stand. The room seemed to freeze. Emily slowly rose from her chair. Every face turned toward her. Ethan looked up in confusion. The attorney's expression softened. Mr. Harrington wished for the room to know that your late mother, Margaret Carter, was his younger sister. A collective gasp moved across the conference room. Emily felt the air leave her lungs. Her mother had never told her. Not once. The attorney continued. Which means that Ethan Carter is Mr. Harrington's grandnephew and his closest living blood relative. Complete silence followed. The executives, the attorneys, the distant relatives. Every person in the room stared at the 12-year-old boy sitting beside his mother. And for the first time since receiving the mysterious envelope, Emily finally understood why her son had been summoned to New York. But the attorney had not yet reached the final page. And the most shocking part of William Harrington's last decision was still waiting to be revealed. The silence inside the conference room seemed endless. Emily Carter remained standing beside her chair, while dozens of eyes stayed fixed on her and Ethan. The revelation had already changed everything she believed about her family's history. Yet something in the attorney's expression suggested that the biggest surprise had not arrived yet. Ethan looked from his mother to the lawyer. Mom, he whispered. Emily could only squeeze his shoulder gently. Her thoughts were racing too fast for words. The attorney adjusted his glasses and continued reading from the final pages of the document. For many years, I searched for the appropriate way to honor both my family and my responsibilities. His voice echoed softly through the room. I eventually concluded that legacy is not measured by money. It is measured by the people who carry our values into the future. Several executives exchanged uncertain glances. One elderly man sitting near the far end of the table leaned forward in his chair. The attorney turned another page. After careful consideration, I direct that the majority interest of the Harrington family trust be transferred to Ethan Carter under the supervision of appointed trustees until he reaches legal adulthood. No one moved. No one spoke. It was as if the entire room had forgotten how. Then a woman near the window suddenly inhaled sharply. Another attorney lowered his pen. Across the table, a man in an expensive suit stared openly at Ethan as though he had misheard what was just said. Ethan blinked. What does that mean? He asked quietly. Emily looked at him, unable to answer. The attorney offered a gentle smile. It means your great-uncle believed in you. The room remained frozen. The attorney continued. The trust currently oversees a diversified portfolio consisting of commercial real estate holdings, investment assets, charitable foundations, and private business interests. Ethan frowned. I still do not understand. A few people almost smiled at the honesty of the response. The attorney nodded. That is perfectly understandable. He paused. The trust is worth several $billion. This time the reaction was impossible to contain. Shock moved visibly across the room. Several distant relatives immediately began whispering among themselves. One executive sat back heavily in his chair. Another removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. Ethan simply stared. Billion. The words sounded strange coming from a 12-year-old. Emily felt her knees weaken. She slowly lowered herself into her chair. Her entire life she had worried about rent payments, utility bills, grocery budgets, and school expenses. The number she had just heard belonged to another universe entirely. Yet the attorney continued reading. Mr. Harrington specifically requested that Ethan be provided with educational opportunities, mentorship programs, and resources designed to help him become a responsible steward of the trust. The attorney's voice softened. He wanted the inheritance to build character rather than replace it. Emily suddenly understood something important. This was never about creating another wealthy heir. William Harrington had spent years watching from a distance. He had seen Ethan grow up despite hardship. He had seen a boy raised by a mother who never quit. Perhaps that was exactly why he made this decision. After the meeting ended, people approached one another in small groups. Conversations erupted throughout the room. Attorneys reviewed documents. Financial advisors made phone calls. Family members exchanged expressions ranging from confusion to disbelief. Ethan sat quietly beside his mother, still trying to process what had happened. "Mom, yes. Are we rich now?" Emily laughed unexpectedly. The sound surprised even her. "I honestly do not know how to answer that." The attorney approached their table carrying another folder. "Mrs. Carter, there is one more thing." Emily looked up. "What is it?" He handed her a sealed envelope. Different from the first one. Smaller. More personal. "Mr. Harrington left this specifically for you and Ethan." Emily carefully opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. The ink had faded slightly with age. She began reading. The first lines immediately brought tears to her eyes. William explained that he had known about Emily since she was a child. He described her mother with affection and respect. He admitted that family circumstances and old agreements had prevented direct involvement. Yet he had quietly followed their lives through trusted contacts. Then came the sentence that changed everything. "The greatest investment I ever witnessed was not made in business. It was made by a young mother who raised an extraordinary boy without asking anyone to rescue her." Emily covered her mouth. Across the room, Ethan looked up at her. "What does it say?" She handed him the letter. As he read, his expression slowly changed. The billionaire whose face he had only seen in photographs somehow sounded warm, kind, and human. Not distant. Not intimidating. Human. Outside the conference room windows, Manhattan stretched endlessly beneath a gray afternoon sky. Taxis moved through crowded streets. Millions of people continued their ordinary lives. Yet for Emily and Ethan, nothing would ever be ordinary again. Hundreds of miles away in Ohio, Ryan Carter was finishing another routine workday, completely unaware that a decision made inside a New York conference room had just altered the future of the son he had spent years refusing to support. The flight back to Ohio felt completely different from the flight to New York. When Emily Carter and Ethan boarded the plane 2 days earlier, they carried uncertainty, questions, and a single mysterious envelope. Now they carried folders filled with legal documents, business cards from attorneys, and a reality neither of them fully understood. Ethan sat beside the window watching clouds drift beneath the aircraft. Every few minutes, he glanced down at the handwritten letter William Harrington had left behind. He had already read it 6 times. Emily watched him quietly. The letter seemed to matter more to him than anything else. More than the inheritance. More than the trust. More than the astonishing numbers everyone kept discussing. "Mom," Ethan asked softly. "Yes. Do you think Uncle William would have liked me?" Emily smiled. "From everything I have read, I think he already did." Ethan looked back at the letter. "But he never met me." Emily considered that for a moment. "Sometimes people can know more about us than we realize." Ethan nodded thoughtfully. Outside the window, sunlight reflected across the clouds like waves of gold. For the first time in years, Emily allowed herself to imagine a future without constant fear. No more choosing between bills. No more worrying about unexpected expenses. No more wondering whether she could afford opportunities for her son. Yet even as relief settled over her, another feeling remained stronger. Gratitude. Because the inheritance had not appeared because she chased wealth. It appeared because she spent 12 years refusing to give up. Back in Columbus, life initially looked unchanged. Their small white rental house remained exactly where they left it. The mailbox still leaned slightly to one side. The paint still needed attention. The old kitchen table still carried pencil marks from years of homework assignments. Yet everything felt different. News traveled faster than Emily expected. Within days, attorneys contacted her regularly. Financial advisors introduced themselves. Trustees arranged meetings. Educational specialists discussed future opportunities for Ethan. The process moved carefully, but it moved steadily. One afternoon, while Emily reviewed paperwork at the kitchen table, her phone rang. The caller ID displayed a familiar name she had not seen in weeks. Ryan Carter. She stared at the screen. For a moment, she considered letting the call go unanswered. Instead, she accepted it. "Hello." Ryan's voice sounded unusually polite. "Emily." The change immediately caught her attention. "Ryan." A brief silence followed. I heard you went to New York. Emily glanced toward Ethan, who was reading in the living room. Yes. Some people have been talking. His tone remained cautious. About what happened? Emily already knew where the conversation was heading. I imagine they have. Ryan cleared his throat. Is it true? What part? Another pause. The inheritance. Emily folded her hands together. For years, conversations with Ryan centered around excuses, missed payments, broken promises, reasons he could not contribute. Today felt different. Yes, she answered simply. Silence stretched across the line. Wow. That single word carried disbelief, curiosity, and something else Emily could not quite identify. How much? Ryan finally asked. Emily almost laughed. Not because the question surprised her, because it was exactly the question she expected. That information is private. Ryan hesitated. Right. The conversation became awkward. How is Ethan? Emily asked. She genuinely wanted to know if Ryan would ask about his son first. He had not. He is good, Ryan replied quickly. Can I talk to him? Emily looked toward the living room. Ethan remained focused on his book. For years, Ryan rarely called. Birthdays were inconsistent. School events were forgotten. Holidays often passed without contact. Yet suddenly he wanted to talk. Emily understood why. She simply hoped Ethan did not. I will ask him. She carried the phone into the living room. Your father would like to speak with you. Ethan looked surprised. Dad? Yes. Ethan accepted the phone. Hello. Emily quietly returned to the kitchen. She could not hear every word, but she noticed something immediately. Ryan sounded more interested than usual, more engaged, more curious. The conversation lasted nearly 15 minutes, longer than any call they had shared in years. Afterward, Ethan handed the phone back. How was that? Emily asked. Ethan shrugged. Okay. What did you talk about? School. New York. Stuff. Then he returned to his book. Yet something about his expression seemed thoughtful. Later that evening, after Ethan went upstairs, Emily sat alone on the back porch. Autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves. Streetlights glowed softly along the quiet neighborhood road. She thought about the phone call, about the sudden interest, about the timing. Deep down, she knew human nature well enough to recognize what was happening. News of the inheritance had reached Ryan, and for the first time in many years, he appeared eager to reconnect. Inside the house, Ethan's laughter drifted faintly from upstairs as he spoke with a friend online. Emily smiled despite herself. The inheritance would change many things. Opportunities, education, security. Yet she hoped it would never change the most important lesson Ethan had learned. Character mattered more than money. Love mattered more than wealth. And the people who stood beside you during difficult years were far more valuable than the people who arrived after success appeared. Somewhere across town, Ryan was probably replaying every detail he had heard. And although he did not realize it yet, the true impact of William Harrington's final decision was only beginning to unfold. Winter arrived gradually across Columbus. Frost appeared on rooftops in the early mornings. Bare tree branches stretched across pale gray skies. The small white rental house looked exactly the same from the outside, but inside, life was beginning to change in quiet ways. Not dramatic ways. Not the kind that attracted attention. The trustees overseeing Ethan's inheritance had been careful from the beginning. William Harrington's instructions emphasized patience, education, and responsibility. There would be no sudden luxury cars, no enormous purchases, no reckless spending. Instead, meetings filled their calendar. Financial advisors visited regularly. Educational consultants evaluated opportunities. Attorneys explained documents that seemed endless. Through it all, Ethan remained surprisingly unchanged. One Saturday morning, Emily found him sitting at the kitchen table wearing the same old sweatshirt he had owned for nearly 2 years. A notebook sat open beside him. What are you doing? She asked. Ethan looked up. Planning. Emily smiled. Planning what? He pushed the notebook toward her. Several pages contained sketches and notes. Community projects. Scholarship ideas. Youth programs. Emily blinked. What is all this? Ethan shrugged. The trustees asked what I would do if I could help people. Emily turned another page. More ideas appeared. Renovating playgrounds. Supporting after-school programs. Providing school supplies. You spent all morning on this. Most of last week. Emily felt an unexpected lump in her throat. For years she worried that money might someday change him if he ever had it. Instead, he seemed more interested in helping others than helping himself. The phone rang. Emily glanced at the screen. Ryan Carter. Again. The calls had become more frequent over the past month. At first once a week, then every few days. Recently, almost every day. It is your father, she said. Ethan looked up from his notebook. I can talk to him. Emily handed him the phone. As she moved toward the sink, she listened without meaning to. Ryan sounded cheerful, more cheerful than she remembered. Hey, buddy. Hi, Dad. How is school? Good. How are things going? Ethan paused. Good. The conversation continued. Yet Emily noticed something. Ryan asked detailed questions now. Questions about meetings, about travel, about opportunities, about trustees, about future plans. Questions he never seemed interested in before. Later that afternoon, Ethan sat quietly on the porch steps watching snowflakes drift across the yard. Emily joined him with 2 mugs of hot chocolate. Can I ask you something? She said. Ethan nodded. Sure. How do you feel about your father calling more often? Ethan stared at the falling snow. I like talking to him. Emily waited. But Ethan wrapped both hands around the mug. It feels different. Emily remained silent. I do not know how to explain it. Ethan glanced down. Before New York, he never really asked about much. Emily listened carefully. And now he asks about everything. The answer carried no anger, no accusation, just observation, which somehow made it more powerful. Emily nodded slowly. You are very perceptive. Ethan smiled faintly. Uncle William said observation is a superpower. Emily laughed softly. The letter had become almost sacred to him. He carried a copy in his backpack. Another remained in his bedroom drawer. Sometimes she would find him rereading sections late at night. 2 weeks later, another development arrived unexpectedly. One of the trustees requested a meeting. Emily and Ethan drove downtown to a modern office building overlooking the river. Inside, they met with Margaret Collins, a senior advisor who had worked closely with William Harrington for nearly 20 years. After discussing educational plans, she opened a folder. There is something else. Ethan sat up straighter. Margaret smiled. Your uncle created a series of private recordings before he passed away. Emily frowned. Recordings? Video messages. Ethan's eyes widened. Margaret nodded. He wanted them delivered at specific milestones. She slid a small flash drive across the table. This is the first one. That evening, they watched together in the living room. The video quality was excellent. William Harrington appeared seated in a library surrounded by books. For a moment, it felt as though he were speaking directly into the room. Hello, Ethan, he began. The boy immediately leaned forward. William smiled gently. If you are watching this, then I am no longer around to meet you properly. That is one of my life's great regrets. Emily watched Ethan's face carefully. I imagine you have many questions, William continued. I know I would. He chuckled softly. The first thing I want you to understand is this. Your inheritance is not proof of your worth. Your worth existed long before any of this happened. Ethan sat, completely still. William continued. The people who loved you before they knew about money are the people you must never forget. Emily felt tears gathering in her eyes. Then William said something neither of them expected. One day, there may be people who suddenly wish they had spent more time with you. Listen politely. Forgive where appropriate. But always remember who stood beside you when standing beside you offered no advantage at all. The room became silent after the video ended. Ethan stared at the blank television screen for several seconds. Finally, he looked at his mother. Neither spoke. Neither needed to. Because both of them understood exactly who William had been talking about. And somewhere else in Columbus, Ryan Carter was making plans of his own, unaware that the man he had never met seemed to understand him better than he understood himself. Spring arrived earlier than expected that year. The snow disappeared from Columbus almost overnight, replaced by patches of green grass and blooming trees along neighborhood streets. The world seemed to be waking up again. For Emily Carter, the change in seasons felt symbolic. The long years of surviving 1 month at a time were finally behind her, yet she remained cautious. Wealth had entered their lives, but she refused to let it redefine who they were. Every morning still began the same way. Breakfast at the kitchen table. School for Ethan. Work meetings for Emily. The difference was that worry no longer sat beside them like an uninvited guest. One Friday afternoon, Ethan returned home carrying a folded piece of paper. Mom, Emily looked up from her laptop. What is it? Ethan handed her the paper. Career day is next month. Emily smiled. That sounds fun. Ethan sat down across from her. Parents can come talk about their jobs. Emily scanned the information sheet. Local professionals would visit classrooms to discuss their careers and answer questions. She looked back at her son. Do you want me to do it? Ethan hesitated. Actually, I was wondering if Dad would. Emily blinked. The request surprised her. Your father? Ethan shrugged. He keeps saying he wants to spend more time together. Emily carefully set the paper aside. Over the previous 2 months, Ryan Carter's presence had become increasingly regular. More phone calls, more texts, more invitations, more promises. Some of the effort appeared genuine. Some of it felt difficult to interpret. If that is what you want, you can ask him. Ethan nodded. Okay. That evening, Ryan answered on the second ring. Ethan spoke with him privately for several minutes before ending the call. When he returned to the living room, Emily noticed a smile on his face. What did he say? He said yes. Emily smiled politely. That is good. Yet something inside her remained unsettled. She wanted Ryan to become a better father. She truly did. But she also knew that consistency mattered more than enthusiasm. Anyone could show up once. Character revealed itself over time. 2 weeks later, career day arrived. Emily took the morning off work and sat near the back of Ethan's classroom alongside several other parents. The children laughed and talked excitedly while waiting for guest speakers. Every few minutes, Ethan glanced toward the hallway. The first presentation began. Then another. Then another. Ryan had still not arrived. Emily checked the clock. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Ethan continued looking toward the door. His excitement slowly faded into uncertainty. Emily recognized the expression immediately. She had seen it years earlier at birthday parties, school concerts, soccer games, places where promises had quietly failed to become reality. Finally, just before the event ended, Ryan rushed into the classroom. His tie was slightly crooked. His breathing was uneven. Sorry, he said. Traffic was terrible. The teacher welcomed him politely. Ryan delivered a brief presentation about his sales job. The children listened respectfully. Ethan smiled. Yet Emily noticed something. The disappointment never completely left his eyes. Later that afternoon, they stopped for ice cream on the way home. Ethan sat quietly beside her in the booth. Are you okay? Emily asked. He nodded. Sure. You seem thoughtful. Ethan stirred his milkshake slowly. I think Dad really wanted to come. Emily waited. But Ethan looked out the window. I wish he wanted to come before. The honesty of the statement lingered between them. Emily reached across the table and squeezed his hand. That is a fair feeling. Ethan nodded. I am not angry. I know. I just keep wondering why everything changed so fast. Emily did not answer immediately because she had asked herself the same question many times. That evening, after Ethan went upstairs, her phone rang. Ryan again. How did I do? He asked. Emily leaned back in her chair. You showed up. I almost missed it. I noticed. Ryan sighed. Look, Emily, I know what you were thinking. She remained silent. You think I am only trying because of the inheritance. Emily stared out the kitchen window at the darkening sky. What do you think? Another long pause followed. I do not know. The honesty surprised her. Ryan laughed softly, though there was little humor in it. Maybe part of me regrets a lot of things. Emily listened. When Ethan was younger, I kept telling myself there would be time later. His voice grew quieter. Later became years. For the first time in a very long time, Emily heard something that sounded genuine. Not excuses. Not deflection. Regret. You still have time, she said carefully. Then why does it feel like I missed so much already? Emily looked toward the staircase where Ethan's bedroom light glowed beneath the door. Because you did. The line remained silent. Not angry. Not defensive. Just silent. After they ended the call, Emily sat alone at the kitchen table. Outside, spring rain began tapping softly against the windows. Upstairs, Ethan slept peacefully. Across town, Ryan was probably confronting truths he had avoided for years. And somewhere beyond all of them, the lessons William Harrington left behind continued unfolding exactly as he intended. Because the inheritance was never the real test. The real test was what people revealed about themselves once money entered the story. The following month brought a level of attention neither Emily nor Ethan had anticipated. Not because they sought it. In fact, they spent considerable effort trying to avoid it. Yet wealth on the scale associated with the Harrington Trust attracted curiosity the way bright lights attracted moths. Local newspapers published articles about William Harrington's legacy. Business magazines discussed the future of the trust. Financial analysts speculated about long-term plans. Most reports avoided naming Ethan directly because he was a minor, but rumors traveled quickly. In Columbus, rumors traveled even faster. One afternoon, Ethan returned home from school carrying his backpack more slowly than usual. Emily noticed immediately. "How was your day?" she asked. Ethan shrugged. "Fine." The answer sounded automatic. Emily had spent 12 years learning the difference between a real answer and a protective one. "Just fine." Ethan dropped his backpack beside the kitchen table. Some kids found articles online. Emily felt her stomach tighten slightly. "What happened?" Ethan sat down. "Nothing bad." He hesitated. "Just weird." Emily waited patiently. "Some people suddenly want to be friends." He stared at the tabletop. "People who never talked to me before." Emily nodded. "That can happen." Ethan looked up. "How do you know if somebody likes you for you?" The question lingered between them. Emily thought carefully before answering. "Time." Ethan frowned. "That is it." "Mostly." She sat across from him. "Real people stay consistent before and after circumstances change." Ethan considered that quietly. "And fake people? They usually arrive after the change." Ethan smiled slightly. "That sounds like something Uncle William would say." Emily laughed. "Maybe." Later that week, another trustee meeting took place. This one focused on future educational opportunities. Several prestigious private schools had expressed interest in Ethan. Summer leadership programs were available. Mentorship opportunities existed through business and philanthropic organizations connected to the Harrington network. The options seemed endless. Yet Ethan surprised everyone. "Can I stay where I am?" The room became quiet. Margaret Collins looked up from her notes. "You want to remain at your current school?" Ethan nodded. "My friends are there." One advisor gently explained the advantages of other opportunities. Better resources, stronger academic programs, national connections. Ethan listened respectfully. Then he asked a simple question. "Will those things make me a better person?" No one answered immediately. Margaret smiled first. "That is an excellent question." Ethan looked around the conference room. "Because if the answer is no, I think I would rather stay with people who knew me before any of this happened." Emily felt pride swell inside her chest. Not because of the decision itself, because of the reasoning behind it. William Harrington would have approved. A few days later, Ryan called unexpectedly. "Would you like to grab dinner?" he asked Ethan. "Just the two of us." Ethan glanced toward Emily. She gave him space to decide. "Sure," he replied. Ryan sounded genuinely pleased. "Great." Friday evening arrived with clear skies and warm temperatures. Ryan picked Ethan up at 6 o'clock. Emily watched from the front porch as they drove away. For a moment, she allowed herself to hope. Not for reconciliation, not for miracles, simply for progress. Ethan returned 3 hours later. Ryan walked him to the front door. The two spoke quietly before Ethan went inside. Then Ryan remained standing on the porch. Emily stepped outside. "How did it go?" she asked. Ryan smiled faintly. "Good." The answer seemed sincere. "He talked about school for an hour." Emily nodded. "That sounds like Ethan." Ryan looked out toward the dark street. "He is a great kid." Emily did not respond. Not because she disagreed. Because hearing those words felt complicated. Ryan shoved his hands into his pockets. "I missed a lot." The admission arrived quietly, almost reluctantly. "Yes," Emily said. He nodded. "I know." Silence followed. Then Ryan surprised her again. "I used to think child support was just money." Emily listened carefully. "I told myself I could not afford it." He shook his head slowly. "The truth is I never understood what I was really refusing." Emily folded her arms against the evening breeze. "And now?" Ryan looked toward the front window where Ethan's silhouette moved through the living room. "Now I do." For the first time in years, Emily believed him. Not because he sounded emotional. Not because he sounded guilty. Because he sounded honest. There was a difference. As Ryan walked back toward his car, Emily remained on the porch watching him leave. The situation was still complicated. Trust was not rebuilt overnight. Lost years could not be recovered through a few phone calls and dinners. Yet something important was changing. Not because of money. Not because of inheritance. Because reality had finally forced everyone to confront who they had been and who they wanted to become. Inside the house, Ethan sat on the couch rereading another letter from William Harrington. Outside, spring winds moved softly through the neighborhood trees. And far away in New York, Margaret Collins was preparing the next video message, one containing a revelation that would connect the past and future in a way none of them expected. By early summer, life had settled into a rhythm that almost felt normal again. Almost. The lawyers still called. Trustees still scheduled meetings. Journalists occasionally attempted to make contact. Yet inside the Carter household, mornings still began with cereal boxes on the kitchen table and discussions about homework assignments. Emily protected that normalcy carefully. She understood something many wealthy people eventually learned too late. Stability was a gift. One Thursday afternoon, a package arrived from New York. The return address belonged to Margaret Collins. Ethan immediately recognized the handwriting. "Another one?" he asked excitedly. Emily smiled. "Looks that way." They waited until after dinner to open it. The package contained another flash drive and a handwritten note. The note was brief. For Ethan, to be viewed together. William requested this recording be delivered 6 months after the first reading of the will. Ethan carefully inserted the flash drive into the television. Within moments, William Harrington appeared on screen again. This time he seemed slightly older than in the previous recording. His smile remained warm. "Hello again, Ethan," he began. "If you are watching this, then several months have passed since we first met through these recordings." Ethan leaned forward. Despite never meeting William in person, he had begun to feel connected to him. The older man possessed a calm wisdom that reminded him of the grandfather he never had. William folded his hands. "Today I want to tell you a story." Emily noticed a different tone in his voice. More personal, more reflective. "When I was a young man, I spent most of my life chasing success. I believed achievement would solve every problem. I believed wealth would create security. I believed business victories mattered most." He paused. "I was wrong about many things." Ethan listened carefully. William smiled sadly. "The people who mattered most were often the people I spent the least time with." Emily felt a familiar ache in those words. William continued. "One day I realized something important. Money can create opportunities. It cannot create memories after the moment has passed." The room remained silent except for the sound of the video. Then William reached toward a small wooden box sitting beside him. He opened it and removed an old photograph. This picture was taken nearly 30 years ago. He held it toward the camera. Emily immediately recognized the faces. Her mother, a younger William. Several family members gathered together during a summer picnic. "This was one of the last times our entire family was together," William explained. "At the time, I was distracted by business deals and meetings. I almost skipped the gathering." He smiled faintly. "Today, it is one of my most treasured memories." Ethan glanced toward his mother. Emily quietly wiped away a tear. Then William said something unexpected. "Ethan, there may come a day when your father wishes he had spent more time with you." The room seemed to freeze. "If that day arrives, remember that people can grow." Ethan sat completely still. William continued carefully. "Growth does not erase mistakes. It does not restore lost years. But it matters." Emily stared at the screen. She had not expected this. Neither had Ethan. "The easiest thing in the world is resentment," William said. "The harder thing is wisdom." He leaned slightly forward. "Protect yourself. Protect your future. But do not become so focused on yesterday that you miss the opportunity to build something better tomorrow." The video ended shortly afterward. Neither Emily nor Ethan spoke immediately. Outside, evening sunlight filtered through the windows. Finally, Ethan looked up. "Do you think he knew about Dad?" Emily considered the question. "I think he understood people." Ethan nodded slowly. "I keep thinking about what he said." "Which part?" "The part about people growing." Emily sat beside him on the couch. "What do you think about it?" Ethan stared at the blank screen. "I think Dad is trying." The answer surprised her slightly. "And?" Ethan shrugged. "I do not know if trying is enough." Emily appreciated the honesty. "That is fair." 2 days later, another unexpected event occurred. Ryan asked whether Ethan would attend a charity fundraiser with him. The event supported local youth programs. In the past, Ryan rarely attended community events. Ethan accepted anyway. The fundraiser took place inside a downtown hotel ballroom. Volunteers, business leaders, educators, and local families filled the room. Ethan spent much of the evening speaking with program directors and learning about scholarship initiatives. At one point, Ryan stood quietly nearby listening. Later, As they drove home, Ryan broke the silence. "You know," he said, "when I was your age, I mostly thought about myself." Ethan smiled. "Most kids do." Ryan laughed. "Apparently." He glanced toward his son. "You think about other people a lot." Ethan shrugged. "Somebody helped me." Ryan looked back at the road. "Your mother?" "Mom. Uncle William." "A lot of people." Ryan nodded. Yet something about the answer stayed with him. Because for the first time, he realized that every admirable quality he saw in Ethan had been shaped during years when he was largely absent. The realization was uncomfortable, but it was also honest. And as the city lights passed beyond the windshield, Ryan found himself confronting a truth he could no longer avoid. The inheritance had given Ethan extraordinary opportunities, but the person Ethan had become was built long before any money ever arrived. The annual Harrington Foundation Summit took place in New York during the first week of September. For decades, the event had gathered educators, business leaders, philanthropists, and community organizers from across the country. This year carried unusual attention, not because of a corporate announcement or investment strategy, because many attendees were curious about the young heir whose name had quietly become associated with William Harrington's final legacy. Emily Carter stood near the ballroom entrance adjusting the sleeve of her navy jacket, while Ethan looked around with wide-eyed fascination. Crystal chandeliers reflected warm light across the enormous room. Conversations drifted through the air. Hundreds of people moved between tables displaying charitable projects and educational initiatives. "This place is huge," Ethan whispered. Emily smiled. "It is." Margaret Collins approached moments later. "There you are." Ethan grinned. "Hi, Margaret." She laughed. Every year William hoped young people would become the focus of this event. Her eyes softened. "I think you would have enjoyed today." Throughout the afternoon, Ethan met scholarship recipients, nonprofit founders, teachers, and community leaders. Unlike many adults who attended, he seemed genuinely interested in listening rather than speaking. Emily watched proudly as he spent 20 minutes talking with a retired teacher about literacy programs. He asked questions, took notes, paid attention. Several attendees quietly noticed. More than one remarked that he reminded them of William himself. Meanwhile, several states away, Ryan Carter sat alone at his kitchen table, staring at an envelope he had received earlier that morning. It came from the county family court office. Inside was a routine accounting statement documenting years of unpaid child support obligations. He had seen similar documents before. Usually he skimmed them and set them aside. Today felt different. For reasons he could not fully explain, he read every line. Month after month, year after year, numbers accumulated across the page. Yet what unsettled him most was not the total amount. It was the timeline. Every missed payment represented a period of Ethan's life. School supplies, doctor appointments, growing years, important moments. Ryan leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. For the first time, he stopped viewing the documents as financial records. They were records of absence. Back in New York, the summit entered its evening session. A special presentation honored the foundation's history. Near the conclusion, Margaret unexpectedly approached the stage. "Before we conclude," she announced, "there is one final message that William Harrington requested be shared at this year's gathering." The room immediately became quiet. A large screen illuminated behind her. Ethan exchanged a surprised glance with Emily. Another recording. William appeared on screen wearing a simple gray sweater. Unlike previous videos, he seemed less formal, more personal. "If this message is being shown," he began, "then the people gathered before you are continuing work that matters." The audience listened attentively. Many believe legacy is measured by buildings, companies, or financial success. William smiled gently. "I disagree." The room remained silent. "Legacy is measured by the people we help become better versions of themselves." Ethan sat perfectly still. William continued. "A child supported with patience can change a family. A family strengthened by love can change a community. A community guided by compassion can change the world." Several audience members nodded. Then William's expression grew thoughtful. "There is another lesson I learned too late." Emily felt her heart tighten slightly. Do not confuse providing for someone with being present for them. The words seemed to echo throughout the ballroom. Money can solve many problems. Presence solves different ones. Ryan would have needed to hear those words more than anyone in the room. William continued. "If you are fortunate enough to have people who love you, show up for them. Not later. Not someday. Now. When the video ended, the ballroom erupted into applause. Yet Ethan remained thoughtful. The message lingered in his mind long after the audience settled back into conversation. Later that evening, as guests prepared to leave, a journalist approached Emily. "Mrs. Carter, may I ask a question?" Emily hesitated. "One question." The reporter nodded respectfully. "How has this inheritance changed your son's life?" Emily glanced toward Ethan. He was helping volunteers stack informational packets near the stage. Nobody asked him to do it. He simply noticed they needed help. Emily smiled. "Honestly, yes. The inheritance did not change who he is." The reporter waited. It revealed who he already was. Nearby, Ethan laughed with one of the volunteers. The sound carried across the room. Genuine. Easy. Unaffected. Emily realized something important in that moment. William Harrington had not chosen Ethan because he needed an heir. He had chosen him because he recognized character. And character could not be purchased. Later that night, after returning to their hotel, Emily discovered 3 missed calls on her phone. All from Ryan. She listened to the voicemail. His voice sounded unusually serious. "Emily, when you get this, please call me. I need to talk to both of you. There is something important I should have said a long time ago." As the message ended, Emily stared quietly at the screen. Somewhere, another chapter was beginning. And for the first time, it sounded like Ryan Carter was finally ready to face it. The flight home from New York felt quieter than usual. Ethan spent most of the trip looking out the window while Emily replayed Ryan's voicemail in her mind. The message had sounded different from every conversation they had shared over the previous year. There had been no curiosity about trusts, no questions about business meetings, no mention of opportunities or investments, just a simple request to talk. When they landed in Columbus, another message was waiting. "Whenever you are ready," Ryan had written. "I owe both of you a conversation." 3 days later, they agreed to meet. Ryan suggested a small park near the river where Ethan often rode his bicycle when he was younger. The location surprised Emily. It was not a restaurant, not an office, not a place designed to impress anyone. Just a quiet public park filled with walking trails, picnic tables, and large oak trees beginning to show autumn colors. Saturday afternoon arrived with clear skies and cool air. Ethan sat beside Emily on a wooden bench overlooking the water. Neither spoke much while waiting. Finally, Ryan appeared walking along the path. He wore jeans and a simple jacket. No briefcase. No presentation. No carefully planned speech visible from a distance. Just a man approaching a conversation he could no longer avoid. "Hi," he said when he reached them. Ethan smiled politely. "Hi, Dad." Emily nodded. Ryan sat across from them at a nearby picnic table. For a moment, nobody spoke. The river moved quietly behind them. Children played somewhere farther down the path. Finally, Ryan exhaled slowly. "I have rehearsed this conversation 100 times." Ethan looked at him. "What conversation?" Ryan glanced down at his hands. "The one I should have had years ago." Silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable, just honest. Ryan looked directly at his son. "I spent a long time convincing myself that I had reasons." Ethan listened carefully. Reasons for what? Ryan swallowed. For not being there. Emily remained completely silent. This conversation belonged to them. Ryan continued. "At first, I told myself money was tight." He shook his head. "Then I told myself life was complicated." Another pause. "Then I told myself I would make it up later." Ethan stared at the ground. Ryan's voice grew quieter. "The truth is I kept choosing later because it felt easier than showing up." The words hung in the air. No excuses followed them. No explanations softened them. Just truth. Ryan looked toward the river. "A few months ago, I received another statement about the child support I never paid." Emily recognized the document he meant. Ryan nodded slowly. "For the first time, I actually read it." Ethan remained silent. "I realized every number represented time." Ryan looked directly at his son again. "Every missed payment represented a moment your mother handled alone." Emily lowered her eyes. "School supplies, field trips, doctor visits, birthday gifts." Ryan's voice cracked slightly. "Years." The park seemed unusually quiet. Even the wind through the trees felt softer somehow. Ethan finally spoke. "Why are you telling me this now?" Ryan did not look away. "Because you deserve the truth." The answer arrived immediately, without hesitation, without defense, and because I am tired of pretending I was a victim of circumstances. Ethan considered that carefully. Ryan continued. I was not. The words landed with unusual weight. I was a man who made selfish choices. Emily watched her son closely. She knew this moment mattered. Not because it erased anything, because it acknowledged reality. Ryan reached into his jacket pocket and removed a folded envelope. He placed it on the picnic table. What is that? Ethan asked. Documentation. Ryan pushed it forward. Over the last several months, I have been working with attorneys and financial advisors. Emily frowned slightly. Ryan nodded. Not because anyone forced me to. He looked at Ethan. Because it was overdue. Ethan opened the envelope carefully. Inside were copies of payment records. Significant payment records. Ryan continued speaking before either of them could respond. I cannot change the past. His voice remained steady. But I can stop adding to the damage. Ethan looked up from the papers. You paid it. Ryan nodded. All of it. Emily stared at him. She had not expected that. Neither had Ethan. Every dollar owed, Ryan said quietly. Plus interest. No one spoke for several seconds. The amount represented years of obligations. Years of missed responsibility. Years of unfinished accountability. Ryan looked down briefly before continuing. I know money does not fix this. He glanced toward Ethan. I know that better now than I ever did before. The autumn sunlight reflected across the river behind them. Nearby, leaves drifted gently onto the walking path. Ethan slowly folded the papers and returned them to the envelope. Why now? He asked one final time. Ryan smiled sadly. Because for the first time, I stopped thinking about what I lost. He looked directly at his son and started thinking about what you deserved. The answer lingered in the cool afternoon air. No dramatic speeches followed. No emotional declarations. Just three people sitting beside a river, finally sharing a truth that should have been spoken years earlier. And although none of them realized it yet, the choice Ryan made would soon lead to a moment that William Harrington had quietly hoped for all along. Not wealth. Not status. Accountability. The weeks following the meeting at the Riverside Park unfolded with a quiet steadiness that none of them expected. There were no dramatic announcements. No sudden transformations. No miraculous repair of lost years. Instead, there was something far more difficult and far more valuable. Consistency. Ryan called when he said he would call. He attended events he promised to attend. He listened more than he spoke. And for the first time since Ethan could remember, his father seemed interested in earning trust rather than requesting it. October painted Columbus in shades of gold and crimson. Leaves covered sidewalks and drifted across quiet streets whenever the wind picked up. One Saturday morning, Ethan helped volunteers organize a community literacy event sponsored by one of the charitable programs connected to the Harrington Foundation. Children filled the recreation center carrying books and backpacks. Families gathered around activity tables. Local teachers donated their time. Emily watched from across the room as Ethan moved between groups, helping younger children choose books to take home. Margaret Collins had flown in from New York for the event. Standing beside Emily, she smiled warmly. William would have loved this. Emily nodded. I think about that often. Margaret glanced toward Ethan. Most people misunderstand why he structured the inheritance the way he did. Emily looked at her curiously. How so? Margaret folded her hands. They assume he was looking for someone to inherit money. She shook her head gently. He was looking for someone worthy of responsibility. Across the room, Ethan knelt beside a little boy struggling to read a difficult paragraph. Patiently, he helped him sound out each word. The child's face brightened when he finally finished the page. Margaret smiled. That is what William saw. Later that afternoon, another package arrived from New York. The familiar handwriting on the envelope immediately caught Ethan's attention. Another recording? He asked. Margaret nodded. The final personal message. The words seemed to hang in the air. Emily felt an unexpected wave of emotion. Over the past year, William Harrington had become part of their lives despite never physically sharing a room with them. His letters, his recordings, his wisdom, his presence somehow remained alive. That evening, they gathered in the living room. Ryan had joined them at Ethan's invitation. It was the first time all three would watch one of William's recordings together. The television screen illuminated. William appeared sitting near a large window overlooking a lake. Sunlight reflected softly across the water behind him. He smiled immediately. If you are watching this message, then enough time has passed for important truths to reveal themselves. Ethan leaned forward. Ryan sat unusually still. By now, William continued, you have probably learned that money reveals character more often than it changes it. A faint smile crossed Emily's face. That lesson had proven true again and again. William looked directly into the camera. Some people will surprise you in disappointing ways. He paused. Others will surprise you in beautiful ways. The room remained silent. Then William said something none of them expected. I hope there is someone watching this beside you who has chosen accountability over pride. Ryan's eyes widened slightly. Emily noticed immediately. If so, William continued, understand that growth deserves recognition. The older man's voice remained calm and steady. Not because mistakes disappear. They do not. Not because consequences vanish. They should not. But because becoming better requires courage. Ryan lowered his eyes. Ethan looked toward his father briefly before returning his attention to the screen. William smiled gently. One of the greatest misunderstandings in life is believing that people are frozen in time. Some are. Many are not. Outside, wind moved softly through the autumn trees. Inside, nobody spoke. Ethan, William continued, your future will present opportunities beyond anything I could have imagined at your age. Success will be available to you. Influence may find you. Wealth may grow. Remember this. He leaned slightly forward. The most impressive thing about a person is not what they accumulate. It is what they contribute. Emily felt tears gathering again. And to your mother, William said with a warm smile, thank you. Emily froze. You spent years carrying responsibilities that should never have belonged to one person alone. Your perseverance changed a young man's life. Silence filled the room. Then came William's final words. The inheritance was never the gift. The gift was discovering who all of you truly were. The screen faded to black. For several moments, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Finally, Ethan looked at his mother. Then at his father. I think he knew us better than we knew ourselves. Ryan laughed softly through emotion. I think you might be right. The evening continued quietly after that. No grand speeches followed. No dramatic revelations remained. Yet something had shifted. For the first time, the three of them sat together not as opponents shaped by old mistakes, but as people looking toward the same future. Outside, autumn settled across the city. Inside, William Harrington's final lesson lingered in the silence he left behind. And although none of them realized it yet, the most meaningful chapter of his legacy was about to begin. 1 year later, the first snowfall arrived just before sunrise. A thin layer of white-covered rooftops, sidewalks, and quiet streets throughout Columbus. The world seemed softer beneath the morning light. Emily Carter stood by the kitchen window, holding a mug of coffee while watching snowflakes drift through the air. Upstairs, Ethan was getting ready for school. Somewhere across town, Ryan was already driving to a volunteer event they would attend together later that afternoon. The ordinary nature of the morning made Emily smile. For years, she believed happiness would arrive through dramatic change. Instead, it arrived quietly, one steady day at a time. The past year had transformed their lives in ways few people could imagine. Yet the most important changes could not be measured by bank accounts or trust documents. Ethan had continued attending the same school. He had continued spending weekends with friends. He had continued volunteering through literacy and youth programs supported by the Harrington Foundation. The wealth existed. The opportunities existed. But they never became the center of his identity. That fact pleased Emily more than anything else. A few hours later, she arrived at the community center where volunteers were preparing holiday care packages for local families. The parking lot was already crowded. Through the windows, she could see dozens of people moving between tables stacked with food, books, blankets, and toys. Inside, Ethan was helping organize donated supplies. Ryan stood nearby assembling boxes alongside him. The sight still felt unusual sometimes. Not because they had become perfect, because they had become consistent. Trust had returned slowly, carefully, like a bridge rebuilt one plank at a time. Margaret Collins arrived shortly before noon carrying a large envelope. I thought you might want this, she said. Ethan looked curious. What is it? Margaret smiled. The final document from William's private archives. Emily raised an eyebrow. I thought the recordings were finished. They are. Margaret handed the envelope to Ethan. This is something different. Ethan opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper framed beneath protective glass. At first glance, it appeared simple. A typed quotation signed by William Harrington. Ethan read it aloud. Success is not measured by what you leave behind. It is measured by who becomes stronger because you were here. The room grew quiet. Ryan read the words over Ethan's shoulder. Emily felt emotion rise unexpectedly. Margaret nodded. William kept that quote on his desk for nearly 20 years. Ethan stared at the framed page. I think I understand it now. Margaret smiled. I think you do too. The afternoon passed quickly. Volunteers packed hundreds of care boxes. Children laughed while decorating holiday cards. Families moved through the center carrying food and winter supplies. At one point, Ethan stepped aside to help an elderly woman carry several boxes to her car. Nobody asked him to do it. Nobody was watching. He simply noticed she needed help. Ryan observed the moment from across the parking lot. When Ethan returned, Ryan smiled. Your mother raised you well. Ethan laughed. I know. Ryan nodded. You should. The answer contained no jealousy, no bitterness, only respect. Later that evening, after the event ended, the three of them walked outside together. Snow continued falling softly beneath the glow of streetlights. Cars moved slowly along nearby roads. The city seemed peaceful. Ethan stopped near the edge of the parking lot and looked upward. Snowflakes drifted through the yellow light above them. Can I ask something? He said. Emily smiled. Of course. Ethan looked at both of them. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Uncle William never found us? Ryan and Emily exchanged a glance. The question deserved an honest answer. Emily thought carefully. Life would have been harder. Ryan nodded. Much harder. Ethan looked down briefly. But do you think we would still be okay? Neither answered immediately. Finally, Emily smiled. Yes. Ryan nodded again. I think we would. Ethan seemed relieved by the answer. Then Emily added something else. Because the most important things were already here. Ethan looked confused. What things? Emily glanced at him. Character. Perseverance. Compassion. Ryan smiled softly. Those existed long before the inheritance. Snow continued falling around them. For a moment, nobody spoke. They simply stood together watching winter settle across the city. A year earlier, their lives had been defined by questions. Regret. Uncertainty. Distance. Now something different filled the silence between them. Not perfection. Peace. As they walked toward the car, Ethan carried the framed quotation carefully beneath his arm. Behind them, volunteers turned off the lights inside the community center one room at a time. Ahead of them, the future stretched wide and bright. William Harrington never lived long enough to know the young heir he chose. Yet somehow he understood exactly what mattered. The inheritance was never the story. The story was a mother who refused to quit, a son who never stopped growing, and a father who finally learned that showing up mattered more than anything money could buy. And beneath a sky filled with falling snow, that lesson became the most valuable legacy of all.